Nieves Fernandez, born circa 1906, was a Filipino guerrilla leader in Tacloban City during World War II. Before the war, she worked as a school teacher. When the Imperial Japanese began occupying the Philippine Islands, including her hometown of Tacloban, Fernandez organized a resistance movement that grew to around 110 fighters. She led an unconventional war against the Japanese throughout their occupation, becoming one of the most well-known female guerrilla leaders of the war. Her exploits are remembered through newspapers, academic literature, and works of art. In the 1930s, the Empire of Japan, bolstered by its military and economic might, began expanding its territory in Asia, putting it in conflict with various Western and Asian countries, most notably the United States, which had large colonies in the continent. This conflict escalated into the bombing of Pearl Harbor in 1941, triggering the start of the Pacific War, a theater of the larger conflict known as World War II. At that time, the Philippines was governed by the United States and the budding Commonwealth government of the Philippines. Due to poor military strategy and a focus on the European theater of war, the Japanese quickly took control of many parts of the country, despite stiff resistance from the Americans and Filipinos. Tacloban, where Nieves Fernandez lived, was one of the areas taken over. Before the war, Fernandez worked as a school teacher and entrepreneur. Little else is known about her early life besides being born around 1906, probably of Waray descent, and possibly being married, judging from another supposed photograph of hers. Her name, Nieves, is a Spanish word for snow, and she was known for being paler than most native women in this section. Her students often referred to her as Miss Fernandez, a name she continued to use even after the war. During the Japanese occupation, many people living in Tacloban and the surrounding municipalities of Leyte were treated harshly by the Japanese, including being subjected to robbery and rape. In her own words, she said, "No one could keep anything. They took everything they wanted." Fernandez was one of many who fought against the Japanese occupation in the Philippines. Barefoot and wearing mostly a frock, she began recruiting native men, eventually numbering 110. Her group initially had only 3 American rifles, relying mostly on homemade grenades, explosives, bolo knives, and single-shot pipe shotguns that fired nails. Later on, they acquired Japanese weapons and more American guns. South of Tacloban became the place where Fernandez and her guerrillas conducted their war. She earned the names Captain Fernandez and the Silent Killer due to her exploits. She trained her men vigorously in manufacturing weapons and conducting ambushes. She was knowledgeable in the use of the bolo during stealth, even demonstrating it to the Americans who met her. Her actions cost the Japanese 200 of their men, forcing them to place a bounty of 10,000 on her head. She was wounded 3 times, bearing a scar on her forehead. The Philippines was finally liberated from Japanese occupation in 1945. It is unknown what happened to Fernandez in the years afterward, although it is rumored that she lived to her 90s in Tacloban with her sons and grandchildren.